So can you just tell me, my I have some questions. The first question, what are the famous things of your country? Because the vast majority people would always like to visit your country. Because I'm also like to visit your country, England. So what are the famous things of your country?
Okay, all right. So I suppose London is the iconic, famous place that everybody wants to go to in terms of Buckingham Palace, in terms of Westminster Abbey, Big Ben, Harrods, places which are iconic around the world. But obviously Britain has a lot of other things to visit. There are lots of other cities within the United Kingdom. So Edinburgh within Scotland is also a very iconic tourist attraction. But because Britain's quite small and has thousands of years of history, you could go to somewhere like Stonehenge, which is several thousand years old in terms of a stone structure built by the built 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. I don't think anybody is that exact about its creation date. I certainly can't remember it. Not very good with the history, but there are I was out the other day driving in the countryside, and I came across some 15th, 16th century churches and some lovely buildings from the era. So obviously we have quite a lot of history, and I think there is a lot within Britain which would interest most people, because you've either got shopping, you've got history, you've got architecture, you've got the countryside, which depending upon where you come from is very different. Because Britain's small, it doesn't take long for the countryside to change quite radically. So it's difficult to pinpoint one thing. I think it very much depends upon your interests, what interests you. But I think Britain on the whole will have enough of those items which fit your interest group for you to kind of come and see. So I think Britain's is a great country. It's a small country, and there's pretty much something for.
So you have so many things, famous things to in your country. So I think I should visit to your country and I will meet you. So your lifestyle is also quite different from us, because we people India are living in the different way. As you have born in US, means in a UK country, you had been living there. You have so much experience about your lifestyles and your people lifestyle. So how the people of UK country lifestyle?
I suppose, like many countries now, most people live in cities here in the UK. There is a population which is country based, but a lot of people, the main centres for people are in cities, large towns. I would say potentially Britain is more structured than India. Having been to India a few times, I think we are more structured in our infrastructure. I think if I compare with what I have seen in parts of India, the infrastructure is not as advanced as the UK. We still have our issues. We had flooding just a few weeks back when we've had some very heavy rain in London. And some of that comes down to the fact that some of our infrastructure is now quite old. It was built by the Victorians. I'm trying to think how else you could, because I think at times it's very difficult to compare like for like, simply because different cultures, different countries, different climates can very much lead to a different way of life. If I look at some of our closest neighbours, Spain, Italy, Greece, relatively close, they are peoples who live outdoors more because their climate is much, much warmer than the UK. So people have a much more outdoor living idea. So restaurants, bars, sitting out with neighbours, talking with neighbours, being in the street, more so at night when it cools down. Britain as a country is a lot more, it's a lot cooler. So we tend not to have that great street culture that hotter climates have. So I think you can't go like for like. You have to see how the climate, the history, and the culture dictate what how a country comes across to others. So if you came to the UK, never having been here, your concepts, what you would see, I wouldn't see, because they're just so, I am so used to them. I'm pretty well traveled, so I do come back and see things in a different light. And when I go abroad, because I'm looking from a European perspective, from a British perspective, I can see quite a lot of the differences between my culture, my sort of the country's my country's infrastructure, and other people's infrastructure and other people's cultures. That's simply because I've traveled. I think the question should be towards you. On your first visit to the United Kingdom, or your first visit to Spain, or your first visit to America, or a country which is actually quite different to your own. How do you perceive? It's very difficult for me to really give a clear explanation, because, like I say, I've lived here for 60 years, but I have traveled. So I think that question is to you. That question is to the person who for the first time visits a country which is quite radically different to their own.
Yes. And then if I talk about our working schedule, the vast majority people depend on agriculture. However, now some people, they depends on private or public sector. They are working in private or public sector, but vast majority people depends on agriculture. So what do most people in the UK country depend on?
Okay, so although agriculture is very important in the UK because it's very mechanized, so lots of machinery, very expensive machinery, the people it employs is relatively small. So the UK is much more service industry, so it's banking, it's insurance. Obviously, we have heavy industry, we have light industry, we have it's 16 hours. It's obviously, we have things like the car industry, aviation, we have electronics, we manufacture quite a lot of different products as well. So unlike India, where agriculture is large, in the UK it's also not a big country. Britain is not a big country. I know India is a country which is advancing in terms of technology, in terms of its development and its manufacturing and its service industry. So India probably has the same as the UK, but not as big as the UK. So probably there's a slight shift in terms of the proportions. You have the same as the UK, it's just the proportion in relation to your population is much smaller. Let's say given 20 years, those proportions will have moved dramatically and drastically, and probably will be more equivalent to, say, Western countries, say the US. I don't think there's anything different. It's just the proportions of the service industry, the heavy industry, the light industry, the car industry. Your proportions are smaller per capita than it is in the UK at the moment. But agriculture is much smaller in terms of the numbers of people it employs, simply because it is an industry. It is an industry.
Yeah. but our education system is also different. As per the UNESCO report on study education, based on two key concepts: learning throughout life and the four pillars of learning. You know the four pillars of learning: learning to know,
Um,
learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. I believe on this concept, and Indian students are also learning throughout this concept. So do you have any other concept of learning education?
well, I think the thing is we continue learning through life. I am not the person I was when I was 18. At 18, I was not the person I was at 10. So we're constantly learning. We learn through our friends. We learn through work. We learn through just experiencing things. And obviously, one of the areas you can learn quite a lot is through travel. But I mean proper travel, not just going to a beach and lying on a beach for 2 weeks. I'm talking of physically traveling around a country and seeing another country and understanding another country's culture, another country's history, another country's religion, another country's food. So I think if I just look at that one sector, we're always learning. And when we stop learning, that's not great. I think if you're continuously learning things, I mean, these chat rooms, these WhatsApp forums have been a great way for me to get a greater understanding as to other people, because everybody's different. We're all the same, but everybody's different. So we're constantly learning, and through chats with people from different countries, you suddenly go, whoa, I'd never thought of that because that's not the way it is in my country. So I think education is a lifetime thing. You are constantly learning, either informally, but as you say, formally through structured education. We'll call structured education, we'll call it school, college, university, potentially work-based education. So apprenticeships, scholarships, which lead you into an educational system which runs in parallel or together with work. So quite often work institutions will have some form of education to educate their workers on new equipment, new processes, new systems. So life is a massive learning experience. It's one continuous learning experience.
Yeah. And I have also noticed that you have too much experience on language because you have been helping to me since long. And as a teacher and as a guider, because I have been learning English since 1 year ago and also speaking English. So if somebody went to learn a language, what do you say as a tips? What do you say as a tips if somebody went to learn English and went to speak English?
You see, the thing is, I'm not a teacher. I'm just native.
Yeah, I know that. But you have lots of experience on language because I have been talking with you since long.
Yes. Well, I think as a language learner, you will be the same because you're learning English. So if anybody was to come to you and say, what's the best way to learn a language? You have as much experience as me. I've come into helping various groups, English groups, as a result of being in Spanish groups and knowing that being with a native is incredibly important, because I, as a native speaking, I will just say things without even thinking about it because it's my language. It's been my communication system for 60 years. Well, certainly since 1 or 2 when I was starting to form words and sentences and my language was developing. So I think having natives on these forums is great in terms of helping non-natives to get a better grasp as to native English, native speakers. And I'm going to take this generally because, like I say, being a Spanish language learner, listening to native Spanish speakers is just such a great advantage. There are lots of people on these forums who've got great levels of English, but they're not natives. And having natives is just a great way of me helping to impart my knowledge to you and to everybody else, and for you guys to listen to a native and attune yourselves to a native. I suppose because I am a learner, I adapt and adopt how I speak in various chats. So if I am with people who have a very high level of English, I give no quarter. I just talk. And I just say things quite naturally as I would to native speakers. But obviously, if I'm with people whose English level is much lower, I adapt and adopt my speech pattern to help them, to help people with a lower level of English, whose level is just advancing, because I understand that speaking at normal speed for these people is just, they're going to find it difficult. So they are the things I've learned in terms of just not being a teacher, but certainly as somebody who is trying to assist. So I would remove the word teacher from me. I assist as much as I can. English learners. I think I'm an assister and not a teacher.